Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wonder Series. It is Wonder Wednesday. This is your opportunity to take some time for yourself and to look at life from a different perspective. How would life change if you looked at other opportunities and possibilities that could come your way? This is what we want to wonder about, and how honestly, how that can change your life and help you create that healthy, happy lifestyle that you've been looking for, where you can thrive, where you can flourish in life, in business, in career, in all of those aspects in life. That's what we're here to talk about today. So I'm really excited to introduce you to my special guest today. My guest is Dr. Amber Tichenor. She is the founder of 2B Coaching and Consulting. She has a PhD in IO psychology, so we're going to talk about that. She's a thought leader on the topic of female rivalry. Amber has 20 plus years of experience as an organizational consultant, and her book, Behind Frenemy Lines, Rising Above Female Rivalry to Be Unstoppable Together, is on sale now. So Amber, welcome to the Wonder Series.
Denise, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you. This is an interesting topic, and one that I think a lot of women shy away from. So
Yes.
we'll get into that, but tell us who Amber is. Who are you? This is your bio. Who is Amber, and how did you get to where you are today to talk to me about Behind Frenemy Lines?
Yes, that title.
I love it.
First off, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, and I'm a friend. So I'm not just, my title, but in my bio, you mentioned IO psychology. So that's industrial organizational psychology. So it's like the psychology of the working environment.
Mm-hmm.
So I have my master's and PhD in that. And I had to write on a problem I saw occurring at work. And I saw this female rivalry thing. And until that point, I maybe had bits and pieces, but I hadn't had a full-blown like mean girl thing. And so I started writing on that, and you hit it on the head. No one talks about it. So I called the elephant in the boardroom, especially at work, but I've learned it doesn't just happen at work. So I wrote my dissertation, got my degree, went on my merry way, and I'm consulting for myself and other companies, and then I had it happen to me and I didn't know it was occurring. And it was a doozy of a thing. Like, I would try to talk to her, I would try to put it on me, our communication isn't working. It was horrible. She was just not a nice person. And for whatever reason, I did not see it. And I was talking to my mom one day driving into work. I hated going to work. I would dread it. Like, all day Sunday, I'd get a pit in my stomach. I didn't want to go to work. And she's like, I hate to see how you are doubting yourself all because of this woman. And I went, oh, this is, I'm knee deep in what I've studied. So I went in and I quit. And I was a consultant, but I quit that project and that team. And that's how it came to be what I'm doing. After I had done my research, I kept collecting stories from women, because I found women were very open and eager to talk about this, because it's so often, it's hard to name what the behavior is, but it's very difficult to talk about it, especially when you're in it. So that helped me actually get over what I had experienced, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this, what they're saying is what happened to me. Like, I was rereading all these stories and it was resonating. So that's how what I'm doing came to be. And I started to be my business, and then wrote a book about everything and all the stories that I had collected. So,
well, it's interesting, as we're talking, you have all these stories. I'm like, I think we all have one.
yes.
But as soon as I read your title the other day, I was like, I went, yep, been there.
Yeah.
And it was really hard to, what my situation was, there were two people who were kind of in power, two women. And they were probably in their later 20s at the time. So I'm going back a few years.
Yeah.
But they were competing with one another.
Yeah.
And then the people who worked with them were really kind of torn, who do we listen to? you know,
Yeah.
they both have basically the same
Ugly.
title.
Yes,
So
it gets so ugly.
it was really, really hard because like you said, like I would get to the point where, I'm going on a Sunday and I'm like, oh, I gotta go to work tomorrow.
Yeah,
And I had never felt that way in a job before.
it's not a good feeling.
Mm-mm.
I call it the Sunday blues, but it got to the point where it would eat up my whole weekend. And I'm like, okay, we have a problem. But yeah,
Yeah. And it's interesting that your mom noticed it.
I know. And that I didn't notice it, which is still shocking to me. But I think when you're in it, you get beaten down, especially if it's directed towards you. And it's such often an intangible behavior. So when it starts to come towards you, you'll doubt it. You'll think, she didn't do that. Why would she do that? I didn't do anything to her. So why would she do something to me? So then it kind of wears at you. And if the person is very good at it, it won't happen in front of other people. So it's hard for others to notice it.
I could see that.
But they can feel it like you did. You can feel it. I mean, it can, you're walking on eggshells, and I talk a lot about it at work because it's a huge dynamic at work, but it can happen in your neighborhood, your church, your families. Like it's rare that I've met a woman who has not experienced it in some form at some place in time.
Well, it's interesting because, thinking about my life in the past, like where I had experienced it. And I think we experienced it as kids, those mean girl times.
Oh gosh. Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
And
I remember dealing with
yeah.
the mean girls and how it diminished me and made me feel bad and small. And maybe there was something wrong with me.
Absolutely. And if you can't talk about it at that age, especially if fast forward to present day, if something has happened to you, you'll get triggered and go back to how you felt as a little girl too, because it's crazy, and it can start so young. Probably my earliest memory was maybe fourth grade-ish, but I have a daughter now who's almost 14, and I naively thought, oh, we have until like late grade school, middle school before these behaviors pop up. It started in kindergarten.
Oh gosh.
And
Okay.
she would tell me stories, and I would think, this is a learned behavior, because these little girls don't know how to do that on their own. They're emulating or seeing something similar happening from a prominent figure in their lives, but it could get ugly. It was
Wow.
surprising.
Because I was going to ask, like, where does it come from? I mean, I kept thinking when I was in junior high school, you always hear about the mean girls, but
Yeah.
where does it stem from? And you kind of answered that question, but I guess that it even goes beyond that. So the little girls in kindergarten are seeing it from maybe their moms or
Their
somebody.
mom's a prominent figure. So I think it's every person is different. It's not really a black and white behavior. So I often totally think it comes from within. It's a lack of self-esteem. You don't feel good about yourself. I also think it could be a learned behavior. You were taught you were never good enough. I think in varying situations, maybe in a work environment, let's say it's competition for there's not enough room at the top, or it's somebody that wants power. So everyone is a little bit different, but ultimately except I do think there are often some people that are just mean. You run across a bad egg every now and again.
Yeah.
Chances are, most often, I think it's you don't feel good about yourself, and so you're projecting it, because I'm a firm believer that women who like themselves like other women. And you can see that like with different women. But if you don't like yourself, why are you going to like other people?
That's true. And I remember my mom would always say to me, Denise, it's not you, they're just jealous. And I was thinking, when you're 13, you're a lanky, dorky looking kid. Like, what are they jealous of? Like, I didn't have anything for someone to be jealous of.
But your mom was right. And I have to tell my daughter that, my son too, for that. I mean, it's just, you have no control over the behaviors that are projected on you.
Mm,
What you do have control over is how you respond.
yes.
And so that can be very hard to learn, and it can be still very hurtful. As you know, you remember what happened at 13. I remember, and it's hurtful. And so it's really, especially at that age when you're coming into your own, it's hard to think, why isn't it about me? But it's not. And we just have to keep saying that over and over again, and hopefully they'll believe it, you'll believe it. But
It is hard because I think it does start to kind of really kind of get into your psyche, especially when it starts so young.
especially when it starts so young, and I've even had some women have said, I truly began to wonder what was wrong with me, because it was like a repetitive type of behavior. And one woman in particularly, she's beautiful. Like, she looks like the whole package. And I know her. She's also a friend. She's beautiful inside and out. She could be one of your best friend, but I think that was a trigger for other women who felt insecure in their own skin. And so they view her as a threat. And it's like, that's sad, because it doesn't have to be that way.
Right. And of course, the question always is, how do I threaten somebody? How do you do that? Like when you're young, it's interesting. It's an interesting thought process.
It is. And it has many faucets and levels. And it's like, yeah. But if you are on the receiving end of it, as you know, it feels not good at all. In fact, and I know someone who've extensively dealt with a female bully, because I firmly believe if it starts and then continues, it is a form of a bullying behavior. And I couldn't diagnose them, but I bet some women have experienced PTSD as a result of it, because it's just a heinous behavior, especially if it's occurring at work and that person is has some sort of control or input or say into your promotional track or your pay or compensation. So
I could see that. And
yeah.
and I've been out of the corporate world for about
Yeah.
20 years. So it's interesting that even the times that I can remember, and I can only imagine that it's gotten worse as time has gone on. More women in the
Yeah.
workforce.
Yeah. And more women, less room, perceived room at the top. Maybe you're working in a good old boy environment. I mean, there's lots of reasons, but it does come back down. I think that the person projecting the behavior is unhappy in her own skin 9 times out of 10. But
Makes sense.
yeah.
And that's great. We know that person has to deal with their stuff, but how do we deal with
How do we
deal with our feelings and emotions in the situations?
Well, it's so hard so often, and I've learned myself, like when you're in it, it's because you get beaten down. I say you lose your shine, your world kind of turns gray, because if it's happening at work, it's not just staying at work, it's coming home with you. It impacts your other relationships. And so because it's so hard to talk about, it's hard to vocalize these intangible behaviors. And so at work, it's a fine line. Is HR going to believe you? I've had women tell me HR absolutely said, you guys deal with it, or you're having a cat fight, or you're imagining things. And that is adding fuel to the flame, but when you're out of it and you can reflect, I think that with time, you can kind of look back and see it. I always tell, if you feel you're having it occur, especially at work, the first step of action is to document, because at some point you'll see a theme being produced, even if no one else is in the room with you. You can write, this happened when, and this happened at that time, and maybe in the future, like if you're meeting one-on-one, you'd say, Denise, will you join us? Like you have somebody there, like that will help you produce a pattern.
That does make a lot of sense, because it's always about, you always say, first you have to acknowledge
Yes.
that this is happening.
Yeah.
And I think when like you said, you didn't even recognize it first.
Yeah.
Once you recognize, it's so clear.
Yes, and I recognized something was wrong, but I just thought, gosh, this is a hard person to deal with. I never thought of it in the terms of female rivalry. And so I remember I approached her and I said, hey, and I put it on me, like, I feel our communication could be better. Um, what can I do is there anything I can do to improve this, or, and oh no, everything's just great. But in hindsight, and then a couple days later, she like went off on me and lost it. And as I looked at it in hindsight, I think it was the control thing for her. I caught her off guard when I approached her about it. And so she wasn't in her comfort zone. But then, after she'd settled on it a couple days, she then had control again. But I'll often tell women, if you feel comfortable, maybe go have a cup of coffee, or, have a side conversation somewhere. See, maybe she is unaware that she's doing what she's doing. Maybe there's cultural or whatever differences, raised differently, and maybe she's not aware of how she's coming across. But don't have high expectations that if you do go have coffee or a talk with her, that's going to make everything hunky-dory, because she may deny anything is going on, and or that may add again fuel to the fire for her to irk her. So yeah.
That's really hard, especially when it's somebody who, like you said, who's kind of in power, who could be a boss, and because you still have to go to work, you still need
Yeah.
that paycheck.
Well,
Um,
especially if you're someone young and you're dealing with someone that's older than you, that you could learn from, that could be a mentor. And that's, maybe if a lot of women have, I was right out of college, and this woman, I was so excited to work with her and learn, but the other woman felt threatened because new blood's coming into the picture. So
mhm.
yeah, it's hard. How do you find your voice if you're brand new and you're kind of new on the team and wanting to learn from somebody?
Right. And the interesting thing is, we always hear, women, we're a tribe, we support each other, we love each other. And yeah, some of that.
Some,
But
yes.
I have personally in my life found more of the other.
Yes, I think you have to make a conscious effort to search for your tribe.
Mhm.
And it's not just an automatic. And you certainly can't, unfortunately, go into a working environment, or it's very rare that you can go into a working environment and expect that to happen, because I think more often than not, it doesn't. Which, why? In my mind, that's why I'm so passionate about this topic, because why does it have to be that way? Maybe you're a coach and I'm a coach. Even if we were helping somebody on the same thing, your personality is vastly different than mine. The way you do things is very different than how I would do it. So why can't we use each other as resources? Maybe I meet somebody that I think is wonderful. I have a full client list, or I think this might not be a good fit, but for Denise, I think they would hit it off greatly. Like, there's this scarcity factor, and I think it's the other way. There's a lot more out there, and when you start to share, you see that abundance coming back. So
Amber, I'm so glad you said that, because truly that's why I started Living Healthy Lives.
yeah.
It's really why I started my business. One, to help people to find the experts like us
Yeah.
that they need the support from. But like you said, sometimes it's just not a right fit, or there's just something, whether it's personality, or sometimes it's location. Sometimes somebody wants to see somebody face to face, whatever it might be. I think collaboration is so important in business, especially in businesses that where we're entrepreneurs and we're working from home.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And some of my best people, it's like we will refer, and like and that's how you're finding your tribe. But it's you're not looking at the other people like, what are they going to take away from me? They're going to get more business than I am. Like, the glass half empty. And so I'm sure you've heard this quote, a rising tide lifts all boats. And it's one of my favorite, because everybody can flourish. I do truly firmly believe that. So
And that's the perfect word, because that's my big word. We want to live a healthy, happy lifestyle where
Yeah.
we can flourish in
Yeah.
all aspects of our life.
Yeah.
And work environment is a huge one.
Yes, because it doesn't just stay at work. You bring that stuff home with you.
Yeah. So how do we take this knowledge, we've experiencing this. How do you get to a place where you can overcome it and prepare yourself for the next time it may show its ugly face?
Yes, that's a great way to word it. So first off, I think somebody that has dealt with, experienced it, because dealing with it and experience it may be different.
Mm.
But if you've experienced it, I think your guard is probably a little bit higher for that type of behavior. So you might be, on guard for if it were to happen again. I think it's hugely important to deal with it. And so I've had so many women tell me I don't have friends, I won't work with women again, or I won't work on all women teams, or I will never work for another woman. And that breaks my heart. And I get it though, because if you've had a bad experience, I totally get it. But it's like, that's also half the population. Like, you're really kind of putting yourself in a corner. So to overcome it, I truly think you have to find ways that work for you to cope with it. So, there's coping at the scene kind of thing, but then there's the long-term coping, and that leads to forgiveness. And I'm not saying that you condone the behavior, or that you even have to forgive that other person. It's not about them, it's about you, and it's forgiving what happened so you can move on. Because if it still is consuming you, then they're still winning, and they still have that control over you. So if you can forgive what happened and take that and learn from it. I've had so many women tell me, and I know with me, I think I needed to go through that in some weird way. I thought I knew everything about female rivalry from all the stories, and I knew a lot. But when I experienced it firsthand, I was like, okay, yeah, best worst thing I've ever had happen, but I've learned hugely from it. But I've had many women tell me I've learned what I don't want to be. And so they take that, whether they're in leading teams or other groups, they now have the eye for it. So making sure everybody's playing nicely together in the sandbox, and you have that open communication and the collaboration and the psychological safety of a positive environment where everybody feels they can bring themselves to the table and be themselves. So you learn what you don't want to be ultimately.
I've seen that in several times in my life. And honestly, looking up to people, or looking at people who I was looking up to, thinking, this person would be, like you said earlier, a great mentor or role model. And then, kind of to find that, their biggest flaw is, that, they're kind of the mean girl, in business or in your career. And that is really, that has, for me, has really been an eye opener in the past several times, honestly. Where, I've experienced it, but I can still be a little naive. And think that, no, that was just that person. Nobody else would really be like that, would they?
Well, because it's sad. You think, really, and then you do think, what's wrong with me? Why am I attracting these awful people? But I think and then I've heard this is along the same lines. One woman, I've heard it a couple times, but I'll share this example. The woman she worked with, was horrible to her for years. And they never worked together directly, but this woman had say into where she was placed and the projects she was on. And she just couldn't stand her. Well, then the older woman retired. And this lady told me, a year or so later, she saw her at a cocktail party. And was the nicest thing ever, and they've then since become friends, and it's because she perceived this individual as a threat because they were in the same environment, and once they were out of that environment, she wasn't a threat anymore, and then like the barriers are lifted, and I'm like, that's awful too, like, look at all that wasted time when
Right.
you could have been friends.
I was just thinking, I'm like, I give that woman a lot of credit for the forgiveness, forgiving the
I do
person.
too. I was
And
like, because her words were, she's an absolute delight. And I'm like, what? Like, no, like she made your life hell. Like, so,
I think part of that is, and maybe it's corporate culture, you kind of walk into a corporate world, whatever the business is. And as a woman, you tend to have to put on a bit of a mask,
yes.
because it's supposed to be a certain way. You're supposed to act a certain way.
Yeah.
And I don't miss that from the
No,
corporate world,
no,
but
no.
I do recall, in the businesses, in the places that I've worked at, I did feel like I had to be a certain way, act a
Yes.
certain way,
Mhm.
speak a certain way.
Yeah.
And not that it was totally
Yeah.
fake, but it
Yeah.
was much more guarded.
Yes.
And I remember somebody said to me one time that, and I was new at this particular job, that they were concerned that that people that found me unapproachable. And I thought, me?
Yeah.
But it was a corporate job where, I was one of few women,
Yeah.
and I was just trying to fit in.
Yeah. And survive. And then I'll be honest, I have a blog coming out this week about it, but I was never encouraged, and it wasn't overtly though, but there was like a feeling like you're never really encouraged to make friends at work.
Yeah.
Especially if, like work is work. And I think that is changing. Um, but it's like you don't go to work to make friends, you go to work. But now, like, studies are showing it's helpful when you have somebody that a couple people that truly have your back. Like, participation rates go up, like everything flourishes. And so, but yeah, and especially if you're on a team with few women, if you're seen hanging out with the guys, then you get a whole nother, type of label, and that's wrong too. These are your teammates. But yeah.
And it's interesting because in one particular job, the last job I worked before I moved and got married,
Yeah.
several of those people that I worked with were at our wedding.
Mhm.
One of them I actually have a working relationship with. He has a project that I participate on,
Yeah.
which is really interesting.
Yeah.
And at the time, I did look at some of these people that I worked with as friends.
Yes.
But initially it was my work friends,
Yes. Yeah.
and that was different from your friends.
Yeah. Like your different circles. Like,
Right.
yes.
Right. But they were really just the same as a regular friend, like you said, just in a different circle. And it's amazing how those connections, I knew this guy 20 years ago, 22 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, through his business, what he's doing and what I'm doing, it just made sense. We had a call, and so we're working together on this one project, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Because you actually can go to work and be with men and women and actually flourish in your career and in life. But I think we have to be open to it.
Yes. Yes. And it depends on the culture that you're working in. Hugely. I think that can add a great deal to, like, when I'll go back to the female rivalry. I think often a culture can contribute to it, and they can do it in the way of either they're endorsing the behavior by not doing anything about it, or they're speaking openly about it to curb it. But if you do nothing, that inadvertently endorses the negative behavior. And negative behavior is being rewarded, because chances are, if it goes on for a while, people are going to leave, and so who ends up winning then? Not the woman that left, not the organization who's, invested time and money.
Right.
So
Do you find this is still with younger women going into the workforce? I mean, you and I are, we've been in the workforce for a little bit. So the kids coming out of college,
I
are
think
they experiencing similar things? Is it kind of like cross-generational?
it's still there. I would like to, and especially I haven't done as much research since COVID to, you know what I mean? And things have changed dramatically with
That's true.
how we are working. But I do think it is still there. And I don't know if it's as much in same age peer groups for younger folks coming out of college. I hope not. I've heard some awful stories about some of these high school and college behaviors just from talking, with friends. That hasn't been part of my formal research, but that is, you have the mean girl and the cliques like that is still there. But the peers, I don't think as much, but I do still think like if you have somebody that's been around for a while and new people are coming in, there's a threat often, or you feel like you're not as wanted or you're not as useful. And what I would like to have folks look at is why can't you flip that lens? Why can't you look at it like, be excited about it? What can I learn from new ones coming in? What can they teach me so I'm a little bit more current or, involved in the new hip fun things or, new topics. But the new kids or people coming in, they're eager to learn from people that have been there for a while. So it can be a reciprocal relationship. And I think that's where a lot of times where the blinders come on. So it's a feeling of a threat versus what can I learn?
And what's the opportunity in this?
Absolutely, because if you look, usually there's always some sort of an opportunity. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love I love how you said that. It's so true. I always talk about, looking at things from a different perspective, and you just nailed it on the head. That's a completely different way to see things.
Yeah.
And I think more often than not, we get so busy, people are doing their thing that they don't take the time to step back and look at a situation, whether
Yeah.
it's them in, on either side of the conversation.
Yeah. And I agree. And it's easy to, everybody's busy, it's crazy busy. And maybe now with, if you're not in the office as much, it might be harder to connect if you're constantly, on virtual meetings. But, if you've been in an organization for a while and somebody new is coming in, set up a one-on-one just to get to know them. Like, make them feel welcomed, and then they will remember that because they're onboarding into something new and big, especially if they're coming out of college, and they will remember you, and then you can start that relationship off on a great warm note. You're still working with them and might be other things that come up, but on a personal level that goes a long way.
I would agree. So we're coming to the close of the time here. So I want to ask you, what's that one thing that you want people to take from our conversation and to be able to really incorporate into their life or business today?
I think one of the key things that breaks my heart when I've had women talk about this behavior is that they feel alone, that no one else, they haven't had anybody to talk to or they couldn't relate to. And I want anybody to know you are not alone when this happens. And if you can talk about it, or if you can disrupt the behavior, the earlier the better. That's easier said than done sometimes. But additionally, like what we just were talking about, if you have had it happen and you're still in that mindset of what she did to me and I'm the victim, and yes, you were a victim, but you don't have to have the victim mentality. And I'm not belittling your experience at all, but if you can overcome it you will have a weight that is lifted off of you, and know that there are a few rotten eggs, there are always going to be, but you can find your tribe. And sometimes it takes a little bit of work. I say it's getting your date on, that's how you met your significant other. So sometimes that might be how you might have to find your tribe, but there are truly women out there that uplift and empower. And when you find that, you'll know it, because you have an amazing support system.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Amber, for this great conversation, and one that, like we said earlier, people don't really talk about very often. And I think it's great to bring it to the forefront, and to have women realize that, we can be each other's greatest supporter. We don't have to be jealous. We don't have to be fearful. We're here together on this planet. It can be a beautiful synergy.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So if you would tell us where people can find you and how they can get your book.
So I have a website. I'm on Instagram, Dr. Amber Tichenor, PhD. I'm on LinkedIn, Dr. Amber Tichenor, PhD, also on Facebook. And then my website is 2B Coaching and Consulting, and all of the information. My book is on Amazon. It's on Audible. So there's lots of ways to get it. If you want an author signed copy, just reach out to me on my website. And yeah, it's like a workbook, so it's interactive. So
oh, nice. Very exciting. I think that sometimes that's even more fun than just reading a book, because you can read a book and go, oh, that's great, and then you put it down. But if you're actually putting pen to paper and you're thinking about it.
I asked a bunch of questions in each chapter, so I want it to be a reflective conversation.
All right, so I'm digging this, Amber. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm excited to get the book, because I love these kind of workbooks. Like, it's always, inner work is always really important. So thank you so much. And all of that information will be in the show notes. So never fear, everyone. If you didn't quite catch that, know that you'll find them in the show notes. And really appreciate you, Amber. Love what you're doing and how you're helping to uplift women.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So to our listeners, thank you again for being here for another episode of the Wonder Series, where our goal is to help you find that healthy, happy lifestyle that you are looking for, so you can absolutely thrive and flourish in this life. So if you like what you're listening to and you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating on Spotify, on Amazon, on Google, wherever you listen to your podcast. You can also find us on YouTube at Living Healthy List. That's where you will find all of our video recorded podcasts. So thank you again. And I will leave you with this, as I always leave you with something. Healthy living, happy life. That's a great one. Let's start to wonder. Once we start to wonder, we start to live. Have a great week, everyone.